Arthur was enjoying a rare, quiet morning with a cup of coffee and a good book, when a loud knock on the door interrupted his peace. He sighed, already suspecting who might be behind it. Sure enough, when he opened the door, there stood his Uncle Dave, decked out in full hiking gear, grinning from ear to ear. "Arthur, surprise! I figured it was time for us to do some real bonding," Uncle Dave announced, clapping Arthur on the shoulder. "We're going on a hiking trip. Thought I'd come pick you up myself." Arthur blinked, trying to process the sudden invasion of his morning. Uncle Dave, we didn't plan this. I'm not even packed." "No need. We leave in 15 minutes, Dave declared, clearly not giving Arthur a choice in the matter. Arthur was about to argue when Jeff burst into the room, looking even more excited than usual. "Did someone say hiking? I've been waiting for this day my whole life." He dashed off to his room, already shouting about all the things he needed to pack. Arthur groaned. There was no getting out of this now. Arthur watched as Jeff began his frantic preparation. Jeff was in full adventurer mode, tossing random items into a massive hiking backpack that was almost as tall as he was. "Jeff, you don't need half of this stuff," Arthur said, trying to keep his exasperation in check. "We're just going for a hike, not exploring the Amazon." Jeff paused, holding up a pair of binoculars with cracked lenses. "Arthur, hiking is about being prepared for anything. What if we spot a rare bird? Or Bigfoot? You need binoculars for that." He tossed them into the pack, ignoring Arthur's sigh. Uncle Dave peeked into the room, eyebrows raised. "You two ready yet? We're burning daylight." Jeff gave him a thumbs up. "Almost, Uncle Dave. I just need my kazoo and my Bear Be Gone spray." He proudly held up a small spray bottle labeled with his own handwriting. "What in the world is Bear Be Gone?" Arthur asked, pinching the bridge of his nose. Jeff looked at him as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It's for keeping bears away, duh. They hate lemon scent." He gave the bottle a confident shake, and Arthur couldn't help but chuckle. Uncle Dave, clearly amused but trying to maintain some semblance of seriousness, nodded. "All right then. Pack up, boys. We've got a long drive ahead of us." Arthur thought they'd be taking Uncle Dave's pickup truck, but as they stepped outside, his jaw dropped. There, in the driveway, was the most beat-up, tacky-looking RV he had ever seen. It was painted in faded shades of blue and yellow, with stickers from what looked like every national park in the country plastered across its sides. The words, "Adventure Awaits," were scrawled across the front in peeling paint. "Welcome to the Adventure Mobile," Uncle Dave announced proudly. "Figured this would be more fun than a regular old car." Jeff's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." He immediately hopped inside, claiming the passenger seat. "Arthur, this is going to be epic!" Arthur reluctantly climbed in, trying not to think about how long this trip was already starting to feel. "As long as this thing doesn't break down, I guess we'll be fine." "Don't worry," Jeff said cheerfully, pulling out his kazoo and blowing a celebratory tune. "We're in the Adventure Mobile. Nothing can go wrong." Arthur muttered under his breath. Famous last words. The drive in Uncle Dave's RV started out smooth enough, but it didn't take long for Jeff's excitement to spill over into his role as the official navigator. With a map he'd picked up from a tourist shop in one hand and his trusty kazoo in the other, Jeff immediately took it upon himself to guide their journey. "This map's got all the best scenic routes, Arthur. We can't miss any of the attractions," Jeff declared, turning the map sideways, then upside down as he squinted at it. Arthur leaned over, glancing at the map. "Jeff, that's a map for birdwatching trails, and why is it from 1998? "Details, Arthur. We're taking the road less traveled," Jeff replied confidently, as he directed Uncle Dave to make a left turn onto what appeared to be a dirt road. Within 10 minutes, they found themselves bouncing down a pothole-ridden path that was definitely not intended for any kind of vehicle, let alone an ancient RV. Arthur's patience wore thin as they swerved around yet another massive bump. Jeff, cheerfully humming his kazoo tune. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Arthur asked, gripping the armrest tightly. "Absolutely," Jeff said, just as the RV rattled over a particularly rough patch. "We're just adding to the adventure. Besides, every great journey needs a bit of off-roading." Uncle Dave chuckled, clearly enjoying Jeff's enthusiasm. "You know, back in my day, we didn't have GPS. We just followed our instincts. So, Jeff, I say we follow your instincts." Arthur buried his face in his hands. We're doomed. An hour later, they found themselves parked in front of the world's largest ball of yarn, much to Arthur's exasperation and Jeff's delight. Can you believe it, Arthur? The biggest ball of yarn in the world. We have to take a picture. Uncle Dave, who was thoroughly enjoying the detour, laughed. You know, I've always wanted to see this. Good call, Jeff. Arthur just sighed and took the picture, silently vowing to double-check the map from now on. Just when Arthur thought things couldn't get any more absurd, Jeff insisted they stop at a roadside stand that appeared out of nowhere. The sign read, Sasquatch Souvenirs and Bigfoot Repellent, as seen on TV. This is perfect, Jeff exclaimed, practically leaping out of the RV. We need some Bigfoot repellent if we're going to survive the wilderness. Arthur started to protest, but Uncle Dave waved him off. Let the kid have his fun. Besides, who knows? Maybe Bigfoot's got a cousin out here. The stand was manned by a wiry old man with a long white beard and a twinkle in his eye. Looking to keep the Sasquatch away, are you? He asked, holding up a canister filled with what looked like air freshener. Jeff nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. How does it work? Oh, it's simple, the man said, deadpan. You just spray it around, and no Sasquatch will come within 100 yards of you. Jeff bought 2 cans on the spot, declaring them essential hiking gear, while Arthur muttered something about scams under his breath. Uncle Dave, on the other hand, bought a bumper sticker that read, I survived the Bigfoot encounter, and promptly stuck it on the back of the RV. Great, Arthur said, rolling his eyes as they climbed back into the RV. Now we're officially the weirdest thing on this road. As they resumed their journey, the air in the RV felt lighter, and even Arthur couldn't help but smile. The detours and distractions had somehow made the drive more entertaining, and he realized, maybe, just maybe, this hiking trip wouldn't be as bad as he'd feared. Halfway to the trailhead, Uncle Dave pulled into a rest stop to stretch his legs. Jeff took this as the perfect opportunity to lead a wilderness training session. He dramatically set up an area with makeshift targets, a series of empty soda cans he found in the RV, and instructed everyone on the proper way to fend off a bear attack using their intimidation poses. You have to make yourself as big as possible, Jeff announced, standing on his tiptoes with his arms raised high, puffing out his chest like a peacock. Roar! Like this! Uncle Dave chuckled and tried to mimic Jeff's pose. I feel ridiculous, but I have to admit, it's kind of fun. Arthur reluctantly joined in, feeling more than a little silly, but secretly enjoying himself. Are we really doing this? Jeff nodded solemnly. Of course. You never know when you'll need to scare off a bear, or maybe even Bigfoot. For a moment, the 3 of them stood there, striking absurd poses and laughing at how ridiculous they looked. And Arthur felt a little of the stress melt away. Maybe this trip wouldn't be so bad after all. After what felt like a lifetime, they finally reached the trailhead. Arthur stepped out of the RV, eager to start the hike and hopefully avoid any more distractions. Before we begin, Jeff announced, pulling out a piece of paper, we need to sign the official hiking contract. Arthur groaned. You're kidding. I never kid about hiking, Jeff said seriously. It's an oath, Arthur. And you too, Uncle Dave. He handed over the paper, which was filled with absurd rules like always greet the trees, no fighting over trail mix, and respect the invisible gnomes. Uncle Dave read through it and laughed, signing with a flourish. I like this one. Arthur must carry all snacks. Good thinking, Jeff. Arthur signed begrudgingly, muttering under his breath. This is going to be a long day. Just as they were about to start the hike, a mysterious hiker emerged from the woods, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a weathered hat. You folks heading up the trail? He asked in a gravelly voice. Strange things have been happening out there lately. Be careful. Jeff's eyes widened with excitement. Strange things, like Bigfoot, or maybe a portal to another dimension? The hiker gave him a cryptic smile and vanished into the woods without another word. Jeff turned to Arthur and Uncle Dave, his grin wider than ever. This is it, the adventure of a lifetime. Let's go find some mystery. Arthur could only sigh as they headed up the trail, silently preparing himself for whatever chaos Jeff was about to unleash. And with that, their hiking adventure officially began. The sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains as the trio set off on their hiking adventure. The air was crisp, and the forest around them was alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and Jeff's endless chatter. Jeff took the lead, arms spread wide as he soaked in the beauty of the great outdoors. "Gentlemen, welcome to the heart of the wilderness. I, Jeff, will be your guide through this mysterious land." Arthur sighed. "Jeff, you've never even been on a hike before." "Nonsense," Jeff replied, grabbing a pine cone and holding it up dramatically. "This, my friends, is a dragon's egg. Extremely rare and valuable. If you listen closely, you can hear it hum." Uncle Dave chuckled, playing along. "Is that right? A dragon's egg, huh? What happens if it hatches?" Jeff looked him dead in the eyes. "We'd better hope it doesn't, unless you've got a fireproof blanket." Arthur rolled his eyes but couldn't help but smile as they continued along the trail. Jeff was relentless with his nature facts, stopping every few steps to identify something ridiculous. "Ah, look here." Jeff pointed at a patch of moss on a tree. "This is trollbeard moss. It only grows on trees that have been visited by forest trolls. It's a sign of good luck." Arthur shook his head. "Or, it's just regular moss." "Arthur, you have no sense of adventure," Jeff declared, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Uncle Dave was having the time of his life. I think I'm learning more on this hike than I ever did in school," he said with a grin. Not long after, they stumbled across a squirrel that had dropped a nut from a branch above. Jeff gasped, dropping to one knee. "Arthur, Uncle Dave, stay back. This is a forest guardian. They're known to be very protective of their nuts." The squirrel stared at Jeff, twitching its nose. "I come in peace," Jeff said solemnly, holding out a piece of his trail mix. The squirrel cautiously took the offering, nibbling on it while keeping one eye on Jeff. "We have made an alliance," Jeff whispered dramatically. "The forest guardian has deemed us worthy to continue." Arthur couldn't suppress a laugh. "Jeff, it's a squirrel. It'll eat anything." Jeff stood up, brushing off his pants. "You see, Arthur, this is why you're not an adventurer. You have to respect nature." As they ventured deeper into the woods, Jeff's antics only grew more ridiculous. He stopped to imitate a bird's call, attempting to speak to the wildlife. And he even tried to teach Uncle Dave how to perform a bear intimidation dance, which consisted of jumping up and down, waving his arms, and blowing the kazoo. Arthur was certain that Jeff's antics would scare away every animal within a 5-mile radius, but to his surprise, they encountered a raccoon that seemed completely unbothered by Jeff's display. It approached Jeff, sniffing curiously. "Arthur, Uncle Dave, stay calm," Jeff whispered, holding out his hand. "This is an ambassador from the Raccoon Kingdom. He's probably here to negotiate an alliance." The raccoon, entirely uninterested in politics, simply sniffed Jeff's bag and tried to steal his trail mix. "Ah, I see. You want tribute?" Jeff said, solemnly handing over a handful of snacks. "Your terms are acceptable." Uncle Dave was in stitches by now, his laughter echoing through the trees. "You've got quite a way with animals, Jeff. Ever thought about becoming a park ranger?" Jeff struck a heroic pose. "My calling is not limited to one title, Uncle Dave. I am many things. A demon, a diplomat, a dragon egg expert, but most importantly, I am an adventurer." Arthur shook his head, chuckling despite himself. "All right, adventurer. Let's keep moving before you decide to start a government with the raccoons." After hours of walking and Jeff's continuous antics, they came across a small, secluded clearing with a breathtaking view of a waterfall cascading down into a crystal-clear pool. Jeff's usual energy seemed to fade for a moment as he stared at the sight in awe. "Whoa," Jeff whispered. "It's beautiful." Uncle Dave smiled, leaning on his walking stick. "See, this is why we hike, Jeff. Sometimes it's not about the destination or the adventure. Sometimes it's about moments like these." For once, Jeff didn't have a witty response. He just stood there, taking it all in, the sound of the waterfall filling the silence. Arthur walked up beside him, nudging him with his elbow. "Not bad, huh?" Jeff nodded, his eyes never leaving the waterfall. "Yeah, not bad at all." The trio sat down on a fallen log, sharing a quiet moment together as they enjoyed the beauty of nature. Arthur felt a sense of calm wash over him, the kind he hadn't felt in a long time. It was rare, but in that moment, he was genuinely glad Jeff had dragged him out here. "I think I'm starting to get this hiking thing," Jeff said quietly, breaking the silence. "It's not about the crazy adventures or the weird animals. It's about being here, isn't it?" Uncle Dave nodded. "You've got it, Jeff. It's about the journey, not just the destination." Jeff grinned, back to his usual self in an instant. "All right, enough of this sappy stuff. Let's find some more trolls." Arthur sighed, smiling as he stood up. "Come on, adventurer. The day's not over yet." The sun had started its slow descent, casting long shadows through the dense forest as the trio continued their hike. The trail was getting steeper, and Arthur was starting to regret letting Jeff navigate earlier when things took an unexpected turn. They reached a particularly tricky section of the trail, where the ground was covered in loose rocks and moss. Uncle Dave, who'd been leading the way, took a step forward, and his foot slipped out from under him. With a yelp, he tumbled down a short slope, landing hard on his ankle. Arthur rushed over. "Uncle Dave, are you all right?" Uncle Dave winced, attempting to stand, but immediately fell back down. Twisted it pretty bad, I think," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I don't think I can walk on it." Arthur's heart sank. They were miles from the trailhead, and there was no cell service out here. "We'll have to go get help." "No need," Jeff interrupted, his eyes alight with determination. "This is our moment to shine. Remember the hiking contract? It's time for Article 7. No adventurer gets left behind." Arthur gave him a look. "Jeff, that was supposed to be a joke." Jeff ignored him, already digging through his absurdly overpacked bag. "Don't worry, Uncle Dave. I've got just the thing." In a surprisingly efficient manner, Jeff pulled out the tarp he had insisted on bringing earlier, along with his grappling hook and some bungee cords. "First, we need to stabilize the injury," he said, imitating the tone of a professional medic, even though he clearly had no idea what he was doing. To Arthur's amazement, Jeff actually managed to rig a makeshift splint using the walking stick and bungee cords. "All right, that should keep it steady," Jeff said with a grin. "Now for transportation." Arthur watched in disbelief as Jeff attached the tarp to two sturdy branches, creating a surprisingly functional stretcher. "Where did you learn how to do that?" Arthur asked, genuinely impressed. "Watched a lot of survival shows," Jeff replied nonchalantly. "Plus, I figured, what's the point of carrying all this gear if you don't use it?" Uncle Dave, who had been watching in awe, let out a chuckle. "You're a handy little devil, aren't you?" Jeff winked. "The handiest. Now hang tight, and we'll get you out of here." The hike back to the trailhead was slow going, with Jeff and Arthur taking turns carrying Uncle Dave on the makeshift stretcher. As they maneuvered over roots and rocks, Jeff kept up a steady stream of conversation, as if they were on some grand expedition. "We'll have to keep an eye out for the bears, Arthur," Jeff said in a serious tone. "They love ambushing hikers in distress." "There are no bears, Jeff," Arthur replied, rolling his eyes. "You never know," Jeff shot back, blowing his kazoo to scare off any potential predators. "Better safe than sorry." Despite the discomfort of carrying Uncle Dave and the challenging terrain, Jeff managed to keep their spirits high. He even shared his mystical elixir, the lemonade from his canteen, with Uncle Dave, who took a sip and raised an eyebrow. "This isn't half bad." "It's a secret demon recipe," Jeff whispered conspiratorially. "Passed down through generations. Very exclusive." By the time they reached the trailhead, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars were twinkling in the sky. Arthur collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but relieved. We made it." Uncle Dave laughed, despite the pain. "I've got to admit, that was quite the adventure." Back at the RV, they helped Uncle Dave settle into a seat while Jeff proudly pulled out his camera. "Before we wrap this up, we need a victory photo." He insisted on propping the camera up on a rock, setting a timer, and posing dramatically with his arm around Uncle Dave and Arthur. "Say, Bigfoot," Jeff called, just as the camera snapped. After they'd packed up their things, Uncle Dave handed Jeff a small, well-worn compass from his pocket. "You've earned this, kid," he said with a smile. "Every adventurer needs a way to find their way home." Jeff's eyes lit up as he took the compass, clearly touched. "Thank you, Uncle Dave. I promise to use it wisely, and probably to get lost again." Uncle Dave laughed, shaking his head. I wouldn't expect anything less. As they piled into the RV, Arthur glanced at Jeff, who was already turning the compass over in his hands, completely fascinated. "You did good today, Jeff," Arthur admitted with a smile. Jeff looked up, grinning from ear to ear. "I know. I mean, I always do good, but today was, extra good." As they drove off, the adventure-mobile rattling down the road, Jeff leaned out of the window and yelled into the night, "What's next, world? We're ready for you." Arthur just shook his head, but deep down, he couldn't help but feel excited. With Jeff around, every day was an adventure waiting to happen. And somewhere, deep in the forest, a squirrel watched them leave, holding a piece of trail mix and giving them a tiny salute.